presentation here today, I want to talk really about focus on the processes, four important processes which are taking place within the public sector of the welfare state. Really focus down. Sorry. So I want to focus on these four processes: financialisation, personalisation, marketisation and privatisation. And I've just got a few headings within each of those which describe the key elements of those four processes. I think understanding these four processes is really quite fundamental. Firstly, financialisation is really probably about the capitalisation of income streams, securitisation of assets. We see the trend towards individual budgets, direct payments, and in a sense cash payments from the state to service users, and those service users then decide how and where and who's going to provide those services. That's happening in Britain and one or two other countries, particularly in terms of long-term care and social care. Payment by results is another developing trend where providers, the contractors are paid on the basis of outcomes of payment by results. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, which is also linked to the growth of the social investment market, in particular the growth of bonds and shares around that sector. Also, we also have obviously the private finance of infrastructure, which will allow us to say a few of those around. There is another key process of personalisation, the treatment of individuals, the growth of choice mechanisms in terms of choosing which school, which hospital, and so on, the consumerisation and individual participation within the welfare state and within public services. And there are contradictions with that because it also means there's elements of disempowerment and dispossession which I've highlighted there. Marketisation process I've identified and talked about several times before. It's a 5-stage process by which, starting with the commodification of services, the commodification of labour, moving on through the restructuring of the state, and restructuring with democratic accountability, embedding of business interests in the state to enable the marketisation of those services to take place. And then the final stage is privatisation, which most people are aware of. But we've moved on from the asset sales, the Thatcher model of privatisation, because privatisation is mutated. What we have now is different forms, working in different ways, in different directions, with different sets of interests. And that is really important to understand those. We've got large-scale PPP projects. We've got the leasing of infrastructure and long-term contracts, particularly in America, but also growing within Europe. So, what does this mean? There are four. Firstly, I think that these processes lead to new opportunities for accumulation. And as Susan has already said, what it's all about is the creation of markets. They are designed to create and extend markets, and also to the transfer of government functions and services to the private sector. We see that particularly with the growth of the global PPP market, where we've got construction companies, banks, infrastructure funds, pension funds, and facilities management companies, forming PPP companies, etc. What PPPs are, and I've argued this before, they are a wealth machine. And just some recent research, is able to show that the secondary market in PPPs has produced something like an additional €4 billion to PPP companies, with the average profit on those sales of 50%, and that's in addition to the 15% already built into projects. So it's quite clearly they are a wealth machine. Secondly, it is about gaining power and control within the economy, to reduce the role of the state and to change public values and expectations of public services in the welfare state. including the promotion of private delivery and contract culture within the public sector. Deregulation is used to weaken the trade unions and community organisations and to try to marginalise other civil society organisations. We must expose the sham of partnerships and private finance. Third aspect of this particular financial personalisation is that there are means to transfer risk, cost and responsibility from the state to individuals, and also reducing the scope of the welfare state. There is a growth of social investment market, and I've just highlighted some of the points about our social welfare market, about how investors are attracted to the high returns and risks. The state doesn't select the providers, social investment funds select the providers, and so on. There's a delay in payments, there's independent assessments, so there's a bigger role for consultants, agents, and brokers, and in a sense, if you step up those issues, what you have is everyone to win it. But of course, they're not everyone to win it, because there are major flaws within that process as well. The fourth aspect of all of this is, in a sense, to radically reduce the role of the state. But, and it's a big but, is to safeguard the corporate welfare complex, where there are tax breaks, subsidies, contracts, regulatory concessions to the private sector. They're moving heaven and earth to maintain that system of the corporate welfare complex. What these policies are designed to do are to dispossess, disinvest, destabilise the public sector, to depoliticise and disempower. And what that amounts to, in my terms, is the deconstruction of democracy. Neoliberalism is in crisis, and I've just used it. We talked yesterday about the financial crisis. I've just got a few points here about the financial crisis that the state is facing in terms of contradictions between the deficit, debt levels, potential further bailouts, taxation, and other revenues that are declining rapidly, continuing recession, slow growth, and the impact of austerity. And just looking at what's happening in the UK, where health, education, health, and long-term care and social security are now accounting for something like 6% of public spending, which is up from a few years ago. And yet we haven't even taken into account aging of the population, cuts in other public sector programs, rising cost of austerity measures, and increasing contradictions in the whole issue of trying to reduce the deficit and meeting political and social priorities. You can't do it all. There is a crisis about to implode. And meanwhile, in Britain, what we are doing is focusing on localism. Community budgets, social enterprise, social ownership, and what we call the big society. So we're, in a sense, turning a blind eye to this impending crisis in front of us. I want to say a few words about alternative economic and social strategy. I'm not talking about a blueprint, but I am talking about a framework. And I would argue very strongly that we need that for the reasons I've set out here. And I'm not going to go through all the reasons there, but we have to move from a position of being defensive. It's no longer any good to say stop the cuts. There's all kinds of campaigns set up to stop the cuts or to stop privatisation. That isn't enough. We have to, in a sense, connect the policies between the finance sector, the climate change, industry, infrastructure, public services, and the welfare state. There are lots like this. We've got to bring a lot of those together within a framework. And we've got to generate debate around those policies and strategies. There are three parts to that alternative economic strategy, I would argue. One is to reconstruct the economy, the second one is to reconstruct the state, and the third one is to reconstruct public services and the welfare state. And I've just highlighted three areas in here. This is not a total list of everything else, so nobody start screaming and shouting that I excluded X, Y, or Z. So I just got three headings there: industrial policy, investment policies, clean energy economy, and financial system reform are three key areas where we have got lots of ideas, but we need to, in a sense, bring those together. In terms of reconstructing, in terms of reconstructing the state, I would argue the state's got 5 key functions: democratic governance and civil society, national and international responsibilities, human needs and development, economic and fiscal management, and the regulation of markets. And in a sense, part of that task is to look at, is to raise the questions about the strategy to be based on public service principles and values, issues, the questions of taxation and public spending, and stronger controls over corporate lobbying. In terms of reconstructing public services in the welfare state, that policy must include increasing the capacity of the state. And in particular, we talk about remunicipalisation services, then we have to talk about new public service management. We cannot have, whatever policies we cannot have those implemented by neoliberal public management, which is what we have now. So we have to change the way in which the state and local public services are actually managed. We have to democratise procurement and reduce issues around commercial confidentiality and around new disclosure and transparency regulations. We need the information about the contract before the contract is signed. Getting the contract afterwards is academic. We have to intervene in the process. And public bodies must involve public service users, and we must implement policies that carry out detailed impact assessments. My final slide. I think there's 3 important lessons coming out of certainly the struggles over the last few years. One sense, I would argue, there's a lack of strategic thinking and the failure to learn the lessons from previous campaigns. We run campaigns, but we don't learn the lessons. Certainly that's been a major problem in Britain, if not elsewhere. Secondly, there's a focus on lobbying parliaments, lobbying local authorities, lobbying central governments and so on. That is very important, but strategies can't be based on that alone. And the third point is that we failed to build alliances on an individual scale. The strategies I've outlined there in terms of new organising strategies, forging coalitions and alliances at different local, regional, national, international, European levels, developing alternative policies. I've talked about a broader framework, but also alternatives at the local level, organising industrial, civil and community action, intervening in that transformation and improvement processes as they're ongoing, and challenging the vested interests of business and business organisations and their political allies. We have to do all of those things together. It's not a menu, it's not a shopping list. We'll do X, 1 and 2. We have to do all of those together. And if we do all of those together, providing in terms of an overall strategy, then that will intensify the relevant struggle.